I am your Democratic candidate for governor, and my name is Rodney Ham. My family is the founding fathers and mothers of the Democratic Party who came from Tennessee to represent, and also Florida in Washington, D.C. 7th presidency, and we're the only family to ever have 3 women, Donaldsons, serve 1 president, President Andrew Jackson. And one theme of that presidency was accountability, and he was never known for his ability to negotiate or change his stance if he thought he was right. Today we're going to take a look not at the governor, but at an up-and-coming politician from Lebanon, Ohio, a senator, a Republican from the 7th District, representing much of Butler, Warren, and some of Hamilton County. Also, some of his colleagues, like John Boehner and John Case of the 8th District. Mr. Wilson came from Maineville, Ohio, went in 1972 to the University of Miami, and proudly represented the Red Hawks and the United States Navy as a lieutenant in the armed forces, helping him to serve later on the Veterans Committee in Washington, as well as the Department of Energy's committees, which I'm sure was helped along by his Lebanon Citizens National Bank career and George Hinkle, with the land purchases done in the 1950s and 60s of most of the farmland on the outlines of the easements of I-71, and rumor has it Governor Dusty Rhodes gave the inside information to people like George Hinkle, Paul Nixon, and others. As Lebanon Citizens National Bank President, Senator Steve Wilson increased by adding 30 new banks in 9 different counties in the state of Ohio. He was vice chairman of Audubon Retirement Community, where my grandmother, Frances Donaldson, passed away. Federal Bank Reserve of Cleveland also employed Mr. Steve Wilson, and he became a representative of the Lebanon School District, who recently had an article that reminded me a lot of an article that I read about Procter & Gamble and how they had some atheist values in their marketing. The article stated that Lebanon schools were starting to offer classes for atheists, not people who are agnostic, but people who are atheists. I don't know how much of that would pass through in Boehner's district or John Case's district, but it certainly seemed to get through Warren County enough to make the headlines in some of the local columns. I couldn't help but notice that he had developed business or professional relationships like that in 2016 with Shannon Jones out of the 8th District. He also came up with some legislation taking a hard line on corruption of public officials and theft, or as we might call it, embezzling. His laws were stiffened for people who took advantage of things like the word integrity that hangs on the offices, hangs on the badges, and hangs on many, many desks and walls, explaining what it means to have pride, to show it in the way that you act, to teach it by letting others see it in you every day as part of your persona. So I would ask my Republican counterpart this question: where does that apply to my Dayton Daily News article about my friend, Democrat and U.S. Representative nominee for the 2nd District, against Rob Portman, whose Golden Lamb campaign contributions are very familiar to you, I'm sure, and Benny Thompson, with his case down there, seems to be headed towards those valued S.A.R.S reports that show the financial commitment and the financial backing of terrorism, like we've seen at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., as your Republican candidate left office, and his Vice President Pence, a very religious man, gave a good interview about who was calling the shots. It's on CNN. Look it up. A horrible day indeed. Now I'm sure they're going to call into question what my qualifications are, and I have already shown you that not only was my family Irish and helped to construct the birth of the American democracy, but we're very familiar with the Declaration of Independence as well. As you can look up Andrew Jackson Donaldson and see that after Emily Donaldson passed away, the great volunteer from Tennessee, who had all the church bells of Tennessee ring upon her departure from this earth, Andrew Jackson Donaldson later remarried William Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson. His widow found comfort, conversation, and a commonality with Andrew Jackson Donaldson. And the widow of Thomas Jefferson became a Donaldson. And her name was Elizabeth Randolph. So you can see how tied I am to the democracy that was born in the Revolution, that grew through civil wars, that learned, prospered through the years, and developed into quite the country represented by Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he represented our country mostly from a wheelchair. A letter was sent to Crab Orchard, Tennessee to Stockley Donaldson's descendants, which were Jack Donaldson and my mother, Mary Gail Donaldson. And that letter was a great piece of history, not only for World War II, but for Tennessee. And I hope that its message rang clear, which is that we allowed it to continue to a point where we lost 500,000 soldiers in the Normandy campaign alone. And one wrote back to let us know about his final hours, his feelings, and his friendship, and his longing for being back in Crab Orchard and seeing my mother's first steps and escaping all the madness of war. That letter will be delivered to Crab Orchard, and some have said that it was wanted to be in the Historical Society of Tennessee. I'm planning a trip to go down there to do that very thing, to honor that soldier who died at 19 years old with one of the great stories of war, sacrifice, and integrity. I hope this message is a message that will lead people to vote and to be able to see the correlation between war over idealism and wars over energy. Senator Wilson sat on those energy committees, just like Vice President Seminarelli sat in their meetings. John Case worked in Washington for quite some time and did one hell of a job as Bill Clinton's financial advisor. John Dana lives in Westchester and attends church regularly and done a fine job as well. But nobody had more obstacles to overcome than my friend in Waynesville, Ohio, our mayor, Charlie Sanders. And he took his fight on to the federal level, U.S. District, against Rob Portman, who has all the ties in the world, just like Senator Wilson does, to the energy, oil, and other committees. He worked at General Motors. He was a regular citizen. He was providing his citizenship and his basic love for humanity as his offering, with the acquired knowledge that he attained serving his community. I had the special privilege of understanding his situation that is discussed in the Daily News, and hopefully London Bishop and Cox Media and others will ask more questions about why the people were pulled out of the car at gunpoint by a certain officer, and be able to get the real story from the man who was running the Miami Cemetery and working with Warren County Probation Officer Charlie Morgan, as well as other prominent government officials, and heard things on a relaxed level about issues that had to do with racial laws being broken and racial injustices, and even was told about one sinister murder and the secret burial that ensued right there where I was digging a grave, and not one single response came from any government officials except for one. Greg Landsman's office sent me a letter telling me that they would pay more attention to the ALS legislation in Washington and that they appreciated my input. And that's how much Black Lives Matter here in Ohio. It's sad to report, but it's the truth.